Life often hides greatness in the most unexpected places. Sometimes, the people who seem invisible, the ones mocked for their poverty, carry within them the seeds of extraordinary destinies. This is the story of Maria, a maid who scrubbed floors wearing torn, faded shoes. She was ridiculed, humiliated, and told she would always remain a servant. But those same shoes walked her step by step into a courtroom where she no longer bowed her head. She no longer cleaned after others. She stood tall, wearing the robe of a judge. Her story is not just about poverty to power. It's about resilience, the power of vision, and the truth that where you start doesn't define where you'll finish. Maria tightened the laces of her shoes. They were old, the leather cracked, the sole worn down so much that rainwater seeped through. Still, they were hers, the only pair she owned. She whispered a quiet prayer before stepping into the grand estate, where she worked as a maid. The mansion's marble floors gleamed so brightly that she could almost see her reflection, though she rarely looked up. She carried buckets, polished furniture, and swept the grand hallways where chandeliers sparkled like diamonds. But alongside the glittering chandeliers came glittering cruelty. One afternoon, as Maria carried a tray of tea into the sitting room, she heard laughter. The family's teenage daughter, Cassandra, pointed to Maria's shoes. "Look at those holes in the front. They're not shoes, they're rags tied to her feet." Guests chuckled. Another boy smirked. "I've seen beggars on the street with better shoes," he sneered. Maria froze, her face burning with shame. She lowered her eyes, placed the tray on the table, and quietly left the room. The laughter followed her down the hallway, like a cruel shadow. That night, as she sat in her small rented room, Maria removed her shoes, touching the worn leather. Tears blurred her vision, but she whispered, "These shoes don't define me. They carry me closer to my dream. One day, they will remember me, not as the maid, but as someone they never expected." Maria's story began in hardship. Her father died when she was only 10, leaving her mother to raise 3 children. Her mother worked as a seamstress, but the little she earned barely covered food. By 16, Maria dropped out of school to work as a maid. Yet, unlike many others, she refused to let circumstances bury her dreams. She loved books, especially about law. She admired lawyers who stood up for justice. Her younger brother once asked, "Maria, why do you read those boring books after working all day?" She smiled faintly. "Because, Tomas, one day I won't just clean houses. I'll fight for people like us, people who have no voice." Her mother often worried, "Maria, don't dream too big. Dreams don't fill stomachs." But Maria would simply look at her shoes and reply, "These shoes will carry me farther than anyone thinks." Maria's days were grueling. She worked from dawn to dusk, scrubbing, cooking, washing clothes by hand. But at night, after her shifts, she lit a small candle in her room and studied. Law textbooks, borrowed, secondhand, sometimes with missing pages, became her companions. She highlighted lines with a broken pencil, whispering legal terms to herself. When exhaustion overcame her, she would look at her shoes, placed neatly by her bed, and whisper, "Not yet. These feet still have miles to go." Often, hunger gnawed at her stomach. She skipped meals so her younger siblings could eat. She stitched her old shoes again and again to make them last. And still, she pressed on. The world rarely encourages those who dream beyond their station. At her university entrance exams, Maria walked in wearing her patched-up shoes. Wealthy students eyed her and whispered. One girl covered her nose dramatically. "Do you smell that? Must be her shoes." A boy laughed. Maybe she found them in the trash. Maria's cheeks burned, but she clenched her jaw. She remembered her mother's words. "Don't let their laughter bury you." She sat down, took a deep breath, and poured her heart into the exam. Days later, when results came, Maria's name was on the list. She had passed, with one of the highest scores. The shoes that carried her mockery also carried her victory. University was no easier. Wealthy students wore designer clothes and drove cars. Maria wore the same faded dress and the same old shoes. Professors doubted her. One even said, "Maria, you come from nothing." "Do you really think you'll survive law school?" She looked him in the eye and replied, quietly, "Sir, I've survived poverty. I've survived humiliation. I will survive this." She worked part-time as a cleaner, a waitress, even a library assistant. Anything to earn money. Every coin went to tuition, books, and supporting her siblings. When she walked into lectures tired and hungry, students laughed. But when exams came, Maria's score silenced the room. After years of grinding, Maria graduated. She wasn't just another student. She was top of her class. On graduation day, she wore a borrowed gown and the same old shoes beneath it. As she walked across the stage, some in the audience whispered in disbelief, "That's the maid's daughter? No, that's impossible." But Maria knew it was only the beginning. She applied to law firms. Many rejected her. Some mocked her background. But eventually, she found one firm willing to take her. Her first case? Defending a poor family facing eviction. She poured her soul into it and won. Word spread. Maria wasn't just another lawyer. She was a fighter for justice. Years passed. Her reputation grew. Her cases multiplied. And finally, her dream came true. Maria was appointed as a judge. The maid mocked for her shoes now wore the robe of justice. The day destiny came full circle was like any other, at least on the surface. Maria entered the courtroom, her black robe flowing, her gavel in hand. As she took her seat, the room stood. Lawyers, plaintiffs, defendants, all eyes on her. But then Maria's gaze froze. There at the plaintiff's table stood Cassandra, the very daughter who once mocked her shoes. Now older, but still carrying the same arrogance. Cassandra's eyes widened in shock. Her lips parted in disbelief. She whispered to her lawyer, "No, it can't be her. She was just our maid." Maria lifted her chin, calm and composed. She struck the gavel. Court is now in session. The same lips that once laughed at her shoes now trembled in silence. The case itself was unrelated to their past. But fate had delivered a poetic scene. The maid who once bowed her head in Cassandra's house was now the judge deciding her fate. Maria never mentioned the past. She showed no bitterness. She judged fairly, impartially, with dignity. But in Cassandra's eyes, every word Maria spoke was a reminder. The one you mock now holds authority. When the case ended, Maria stood and left. But as she walked past, her gaze briefly met Cassandra's. Maria's eyes said what her lips never did. "These shoes carried me here. What did yours do for you?" Maria kept her old shoes, even after she became a judge. They sat in her office, polished but never worn again. Not as a reminder of shame, but as a symbol of triumph. She often told young students she mentored, "Don't despise your humble beginnings. Don't let laughter stop you. Let your struggles become your strength. These shoes carried me from scrubbing floors to holding a gavel. What matters is not what's on your feet, but what's in your mind and heart." Never underestimate someone because of their appearance, their poverty, or their struggles. The maid mocked for her old shoes today may walk tomorrow as a judge deciding your case. Where you start doesn't define where you finish. Your shoes may be old, your clothes may be torn, but if your mind burns with determination, the world will one day stand for you.